Hey, how's it going everybody? EruptionFang here, and today let's talk AIs. Specifically, the smart AIs, which at this point are only the alpha and its fragments. So let me give you a brief lesson on smart AIs before we begin. So while the show has never actually stated there being smart AIs and dumb AIs, Red vs. Blue does use Halo's lore and sciences for their purposes. Smart AIs get created by scanning a human's brain, a specific someone whose mind you want replicated. You essentially upload your mind and everything that's in it. It's known as cognitive impression modeling. Dumb AIs are just programmed for a specific purpose. They are very limited in their ability to feel, perceive, learn from outside their role. Smart AIs have no limit. They can learn whatever they wish, comprehend their surroundings. They're a human's full potential unlocked. They can think at the speed of light and perform tasks 100% more efficiently. That's what the alpha was, a smart AI. Now, the interesting thing about smart AIs, however, is that to create one, you need the brain of a host. But in the process of scanning it, pulling its memories and personalities, everything, it destroys the brain. Smart AIs are primarily created from the dead, donors who offer their brain. On top of that, they have to have recently died or else everything goes away. In the case of the alpha, Leonard obviously wasn't dead. You see, Leonard shares many similarities to Catherine Halsey from the canon of the Halo games. Halsey also had a smart AI, Cortana, and Leonard, much like her, wasn't dead. So it can only be assumed that much like Halsey, Leonard had flash cloned his brain. Flash cloning in Halo is a medical process used to clone body parts, however in Halo, cloning the brain is highly illegal. Cortana's creation was illegal. It also made Cortana the only AI to have been created that way. So the legality of how things work in Red vs. Blue becomes different to that of Halo's, because Leonard is alive and the only way to create a smart AI based off you is to die or do it illegally. So perhaps it is legal in RVB to flash clone the brain because he was given the AI upon request. Anyway, so now that I feel I've given you a bit of a history lesson in understanding smart AIs as well as the process in creating them, let's start with the alpha. As stated, Leonard was given the alpha AI. From a relatively young age, Leonard had always been fascinated and interested in artificial intelligence. This led him to get a doctorate in AI theory, so when he came up with the idea for Project Freelancer, the UNSC gave him a single smart AI in which to assist him so he could pursue his project. Project Freelancer was meant to help him deal with the Great War. The alpha is the most intelligent and highest form of AI that we've seen inside of the Red vs. Blue universe. He is theoretically Leonard Church's highest potential unlocked. His purpose, however, was questionable. It would seem that his major task was to simply just assist the director in whatever he may have needed. One of the purposes for Project Freelancer was to find a match for the alpha. Much like how Master Chief has Cortana, Project Freelancer searched for the same type of relationship. A super soldier whose potential could be exponentially increased with a smart AI like the alpha. However, as time went on, the alpha's purpose began to change. Once the alpha accidentally created a fragment, the goal no longer was to find one compatible soldier, rather it became Fragment the Alpha to have dozens of super soldiers. So for most of his time in Project Freelancer, the alpha spent it getting tortured and fragmented to create all the AI I'm going to be talking about in this video. Leonard no longer cared for his initial goal. He ended up wanting to just recreate his wife Allison. The alpha almost immediately became just a tool to do so. So that's what ended up happening to him in Project Freelancer. There was a goal, but the plan changed and he became a lab rat. So time goes on and the director decides he needs to hide the alpha. So they implant a bunch of fake memories into him, give him a body, give him an all-new identity, just with the same name. And from that point on, the alpha would never learn he was the alpha. The plan to hide his identity so he would never remember what he was worked. Despite the fact that he encountered some of his other fragments like Delta, Omega, and Gamma, the alpha thought he was a ghost. And this is where things become confusing for a lot of the fan base. In Season 6, the alpha dies to the EMP. He thinks he will survive it because he believes he is a ghost, but because he's not, he dies. That is the definitive end to the alpha AI. The most powerful unlocked potential an AI can have, destroyed. EPSILON is an entire being in and of itself that I'll get to later on in this video, but the alpha's existence was squandered from the moment Leonard decided to fragment it. They never found the super soldier to host the AI, just torture on the end of the alpha.
I'm sure you'd make the same calculations I did, just more slowly.
Arrogance is a rather unbecoming trait, Alpha.
Are you seriously giving me a lecture on arrogance right now?
Beta. So Beta was the very first fragment of the Alpha. She was fragmented before anything we see in the show. This is what gave Leonard the idea to begin breaking down the Alpha to have more AI he can work with. This was the inspiration. Beta isn't necessarily Allison, but rather it's his memory of her. So it's not what she was, it's what he thought of her. It's why Texas was such a badass, unbelievable fighting skill and just an A-class soldier. Leonard viewed her as being this way, so the fragment made her as his memory was. So because Allison had died in the Great War, Leonard, human Leonard, was absolutely torn by this even before he was given Alpha. So when the Alpha was created, it was given all of his emotions. It was an artificial intelligence of himself. So the Alpha 2 had the grievances of losing Allison. However, I guess humans are capable of dealing with those things because the Alpha wasn't. The Alpha was so tormented by Allison's memory that I guess what was a safety precaution essentially broke that part of him off and created Beta. Each of the Alpha's fragments have their own unique attribute tied to them. Beta was the failure. So basically anything that Beta would do or try to do, she would inevitably fail. No matter how close she would come, no matter what, she would fail. What's particularly interesting with Beta is her mood, because as stated, it's not Allison, but rather Leonard's memory of her. And Beta is very rude. She's badass, but still rude, mean, crabby. She's jealous. She got jealous of her sister when she arrived at the camp. And it's interesting because you'd think that Leonard's view of his wife would be a lot more loving and sweet, you know? From the fan guide to the clip in the season 10 finale, they seem so unlike each other. And Leonard obviously loved his wife. It's why Project Freelancer practically exists, for God's sake. So the interactions between her and the Alpha should practically be like the interactions between Leonard and Allison, but they really aren't. The human version seems so nice and sweet, while the AIs yell and fight all the time. So there are definitely these weird parallels between the two, but like I said, Beta is not Tex, it's Leonard's memory of her, and that's the part that seems to be skewed in the show with how their relationship was. Considering her going off to fight in the Great War was the last time they saw each other, it absolutely did not look like they had an unhealthy relationship. It looks like such a great pairing that it's confusing as to why Beta ended up gaining the personality that she did.
And don't worry, you'll see me again. I hate goodbyes.
Gamma. He is the Alpha's deceit. He has had quite an unbelievable amount of relevance through the show. Gamma was obviously Wyoming's AI, and his attribute was used to its fullest extent. First in Project Freelancer, before they had acquired the sarcophagus, they used Gamma to split the Alpha. Much like he did in Season 3, Gamma kept running the Alpha through all kinds of simulations that he would fail. Over and over, he would keep doing this, essentially just breaking the Alpha mentally until it fragmented. So, Gamma's role was very vital in the early days of Project Freelancer. And even after he removed himself from Wyoming and went into hiding, his role continued to be huge. A big part of the storyline when the Reds and Blues were at Blood Gulch was Tucker and his sword and the prophecy. And Gamma's involvement in this, with Wyoming of course, was they were tricking the aliens. There was no prophecy, everything was just a lie that Gamma and Wyoming used to fool the aliens with. One of the most interesting things about the Great Prophecy lie was how intended for good it was. There was no like evil plan. They were in a war against the Covenant, the war, the Great War. The aliens weren't the good guys. They weren't innocent, they were their enemies. So Gamma and Wyoming tricked them and their religious beliefs that they had to kill them and end the Great War. That's not how things ended up playing out. The Great War subsided without the help of anyone from Project Freelancer. However, that's mostly due to the Great War primarily being relevant to Halo's story, so it would have been kinda hard for Red vs. Blue to wrap up an event that wasn't their own creation. But Gamma's existence during Project Freelancer as well as throughout Blood Gulch was a very prominent one. His ability to deceive others and trick them and simply just lie to their face was an attribute that was never not used. If it wasn't relevant to his plan or any orders, he was just lying to people.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
You are.
You are who?
You are a dirty, delicious no. Ha ha ha.
Delta. He is the logic. While many people view him as one of the smarter characters in this series, it's not that that's untrue, it's just Delta thinks logically about scenarios as well as people. One of the most notable thoughts that Delta had was his belief that good and evil were both subjective. He believed that there was no real difference between the two. Everyone is motivated by their own goals. What may be seen as being the bad guy, that person most likely firmly believes that what they are doing is right. So in their eyes, they aren't the bad guy. Concepts like good and evil are all subjective in the eyes of Delta. Now, of all of the Alpha's fragments, Delta appeared to be the closest to having become sentient by himself. As established, every fragment has a designated trait. They have essentially become dumb AIs. Dumb AIs are programmed to do a specific thing. They're very limited in what they can learn. So the fragments have become similar to the dumb AI, only being able to function with a single trait. However, they are still considered smart AI as their capacity for learning isn't limited by anything. Delta, being the logic, strayed away from his trait, which none of the other AIs had done. When York was dying, if an AI stays with them and they do die, the Armor's protocol will destroy the AI to thus keep it out of enemy hands. The logical thing to have done in this scenario was to allow Tex to carry Delta, which she had offered. However, Delta refused this offer and wanted to stay with York. Tex tells him that it's very kind, and Delta responds with, "That's just part of what makes us human." That's not the logical thing Delta should have done in this scenario. Instead, he acted on his own emotions, which he shouldn't have done, which made Delta very close himself to becoming a metastable AI. There were still a few steps he needed to go through, however, of all the AI, Delta individually progressed the most by himself. In terms of what Delta is capable of doing, he's been the only AI so far that has been capable of using holographic projections. He can display something or someone to distract an enemy. He's also been the only one to leave recordings of himself inside the subconscious of hosts to then pass on information.
I would prefer to stay with York.
That's very kind of you, Dee.
It's just part of what makes us human, Tex.
Ada and IOTA. I'm going to be talking about these two as a pair because that's how they are in the show. It's actually said in the show that they're twins, as weird as that sounds for AI, considering that all of the fragments consider themselves siblings. Ada is the Alpha's fear, and IOTA is the happiness. They have a bit of a yin and a yang complex going on. In theory, the two should balance each other out, but as we saw with Carolina, that's not the case. However, it doesn't particularly seem like it was their fault, more the fault of the freelancers not being capable of handling more than just one AI fragment. We weren't given much screen time with them because they were the final two AI to be fragmented before the meta began collecting the rest of the AI. Ada and IOTA were also the first two to be captured immediately from Carolina, so we never saw much of these two or their personalities. Theta, the Trust. He was given to North Dakota because of his naturally caring nature. Of all the AI, Theta is practically just a kid. He's very timid, he's very shy, and he's also very compliant when North gave him orders. Even Command didn't find Theta to be any sort of threat. Aside from acting as a kid, Theta's main purpose was to build North's character. He was meant to show off how caring and nice North is. Theta may have been given a little bit more screen time, but fact of the matter is that Theta's existence is that of a child. He was scared to go to sleep, he was very proud of himself when he accomplished a task. The series showed that North was a very trustworthy character, and what better way to do that than to give him the AI whose trait was trust.
I think I'm starting to like her. At least better than I did before.
Yeah. She grows on you.
Still scary though.
Oh yeah, plenty scary.
Sigma. He is the ambition and the creativity. Right off the bat, Sigma is very unique in his given traits because he has two of them. Every other alpha fragment that was sharded off only had one trait. Sigma, upon his fragmentation, was originally given to Carolina, however she eventually gave him to Maine due to the throat injury he had sustained. Sigma was probably one of the biggest antagonists in the show. Once again bringing back Red vs. Blue using established Halo lore, AIs have this theoretical stage of existence known as metastability. Once an AI goes through melancholia, anger, jealousy, they can achieve a state in which they are considered fully human. In Halo, it's practically an inevitability that a smart AI will go through rampancy. However, rampancy in Halo is not a good thing because the AI will achieve a godlike persona that it thinks itself to death. It will consume so much information and just process everything that it will die. Smart AI's lifespans aren't usually associated to how long they will actually last, more so how long until they are expected to reach rampancy. Keep in mind, I'm not 100% sure how it works in Halo because Cortana has gone through rampancy, yet she's not dead, and I don't have a great grasp on a lot of Halo's lore. So in Red vs. Blue, Sigma wished to achieve metastability, which could have been a suicide mission that he was unaware of. Or, once again, Red vs. Blue has taken an idea but changed the concept. Considering that no AI has achieved metastability that we're aware of, it could be that they just become a full-fledged smart AI, what the Alpha originally was before being fragmented. So Sigma chased this goal of capturing his fellow siblings, however, his goal would come to fail in the end. In terms of what Sigma was capable of, his ability to manipulate others was impressive. AIs like Omega needed to directly be attached to a host to take effect on them and control their actions. Sigma was capable of tricking and manipulating the director, Carolina, Maine being the most obvious one. He used his creativity and his ambition to influence others to do as he wished. And considering he got as far as he did with it, it's very impressive.
We are the metal, and we will find you very soon.
Omega, the Rage. Omega has had such a quiet yet effective existence, where AI like Delta, Gamma, pretty much all of the AI, they all talk a decent amount on their own as an AI life form. Omega very rarely talked on his own, he typically jumped into other people and did his talking there. Now, considering that he's just a fragment, and the Rage no less, Omega lacks any real sort of personality and goal. He'll do things that contradict each other because he's not necessarily thinking on logic, he's more so just motivated by conflict. If he can get people to start fighting and kill each other, then that's perfectly fine for Omega. He seems to have more abilities, let's call them, than the other AI seem to have. First and most dangerous of all, he's capable of jumping between soldiers at will. No other AI is capable of self-transferring from person to person, which makes his next ability even more dangerous as well, and that's his influence. We've seen Sigma sway people like Maine, we've seen Delta help soldiers think more logically, but the strongest influence of all the AI fragments is Omega. There is an immediate change in the person's voice and overall mood the moment he jumps into their suit. Texas and Church are the only ones who don't get heavily influenced because they are AIs as well. Now, Omega was Texas's AI and he did have an effect on her mood and her aggression. It's what got Biff killed. So it's not that Omega doesn't affect AI like Tex, but relative to everyone else, an AI may have a tad more control over themselves. However, another thing that Omega does that none of the rest have done is make a lasting influence on someone. I did say he influences them easily, but even when he's gone and no longer a part of them, for some people there's still a bit of Omega left. Just look at Doc. Omega is dead, yet Doc still slides into O'Malley's personality from time to time. Same goes for Caboose. If he needs to get angry, then that's a part of himself that without Omega, he most likely wouldn't be able to do by himself.
I'm the original bad boy.
Finally, let's end it where it all ended. Epsilon, the memory. Alright, so we're back here. As I said earlier, in the season 6 finale, the Alpha died. It's definitive, he's gone, the Alpha died then and there. Every other AI fragment was destroyed as well, except for Epsilon. Caboose managed to get Epsilon out of the EMP's range. The reason that it's so hard for people to tell the difference between Alpha and Epsilon is because Epsilon remembers everything that the Alpha did. So from the audience's perspective, it just seems like Church disappeared for a season or two. But no, Epsilon is its own completely different character. But because he's the memory, he's capable of recalling all of what the Alpha did, where the Alpha ended up, only thinking he was a ghost. Epsilon recalled all of that as well as what happened in Project Freelancer, as well as all the other AI fragments' memories as well. Epsilon is as close to the Alpha as you could possibly be, but it's not. Epsilon is not the Alpha. It remembers everything about him and what he could do. However, Epsilon is a fragment. So in season 12, when Epsilon essentially thinks light speeds ahead of any human, that's only a fragment of what the Alpha could have been capable of. Seeing Epsilon and Carolina work together is what the Alpha was supposed to be assigned to do. They needed to find a soldier capable of handling what the Alpha was. But the problem came because the director became obsessed with trying to recreate Allison. The Alpha's potential was wasted and broken down. So while it may not seem like there was a change between Alpha and Epsilon, there actually couldn't be more of a difference between them. To put some into perspective, the Alpha was such a powerful AI that it could fully possess and control another human being. Epsilon was never capable of doing that. Only one of the fragments was powerful enough to muscle their way into and control another human being. Omega was the closest one. However, he wasn't capable of holding it forever, as Doc took control from time to time. Whereas with the Alpha, he took control over Lopez for about a year, and same goes for his other robot body. Like, Carolina hosted Epsilon. She was capable of doing that, and if you recall, Carolina wasn't capable of hosting Ada and IOTA. She couldn't handle 2 fragments. That's why Project Freelancer was in search for a soldier who could handle all of the Alpha. That alone should show the difference in potential that the Alpha had and Epsilon had. Epsilon may remember all these things and can recreate all of the Alpha's attributes, but in the end, he's still a fragment. He may have gotten justice for the Alpha. He's been friends with the Reds and Blues longer than the Alpha. Epsilon has done more than the Alpha, but he's not the Alpha. Epsilon was not the highest potential an AI could possess. He was only a fragment of it. And that's the difference between Alpha and Epsilon.
Ain't that a bitch?
So there you have it, guys. Those were the Alpha's fragments, and really the only smart AIs in the series so far. I will be having another video coming out eventually where we discuss all of the dumb AI that we know so far, so keep an eye out for that video. In the meantime, I hope that I taught you at least one thing, or at the very least put a bulk of information into this video that you can direct others to. So for now, be sure to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you're interested in more content like this, consider becoming a sponsor over on Patreon. You get all the content early, and it really does help out the channel. Be sure to follow me on all social medias, and I'll see you in the next video.